You've got some water here. So thank you for joining us today. Would you like to, should we start with some introductions? So would you like to start, Elizabeth, with introduction?
Of course. Hello, I'm Elizabeth. I'm from Google, so welcome. I work on the creative agency team at Google, so clues in the name, I work with creative agencies. And I've been doing that for about 2 years. Previous to joining Google, I was creative agency side myself for about 10 years. And what I do in my sort of day-to-day work is really work with agencies to help them bring their ideas to life on Google platforms and products. Quite a lot of that is around YouTube because a lot of the main output from agencies still is quite video based, but it also leads me to other places such as AR and VR and interesting stuff over there. So that's what I do.
Hi, I'm Amy Lee. I'm from Charlotte Tilbury and I am the Senior eCommerce Manager, so I look after everything globally except North America, so EMEA and APAC. Everyone knows what eCommerce is, so therefore what I do. I've been at Charlotte Tilbury just over a year. Prior to that, I was at Estee Lauder, then Glossybox and Harrods, so kind of always in prestige beauty. So I hope you find something interesting, guys.
I'm Craig. I'm the Product Development Director at NMPi. I've been there for 5 years, and now I was looking at working with clients, and now I actually look more at what we're doing as an agency and how our agency can adapt our approach to help our clients move forward and change with what is the ever-changing space in digital.
I'm Claire Rampen. I work at a company called Beryl. It's unlikely that many of you have heard of us, but it's very possible some of you will have experienced our product if you've ever ridden one of the Santander cycles in London. The projection that goes in front and essentially eliminates your blind spot is what Beryl does. Previous to that, I was working leading growth strategy at giffgaff and decided I wanted to go back and try and build a startup brand. And so I'm here representing both the media and advertising side of things from experience, but also community-led brands that really put their customers at the heart of their business model and at their brand. And also representing those direct-to-consumer businesses who want to understand how to maintain that relationship with their customers while also scaling efficiently, because it's really quite hard these days.
Excellent, thank you very much, and thank you all for joining us today. So this whole session has been about customer experience, and we've really majored on that. Are we making too much of a big deal about it? Is it all it's cracked up to be? So should we start with you, Elizabeth, and we'll work our way down?
It is a big deal. It's a huge deal. It's a bit weird in this talk because I've kind of got two hats on. I've got my Google hat on and my creative hat on, and I've interesting point of view from both of those. So with my Google hat on, I'm immediately reminded of our #1 principle at Google, which is focus on the user and all else will follow. And that has kind of stayed with Google for Google's 20 years this year. And since the beginning, that's the mantra that we've always followed, and that goes through our products that we create, through all the experiences that we make for our customers. And I think it's really simple, but actually quite brutal in terms of being really strict about making sure everything that we do is basically focused on the user, focused on the customer. So if that's something to go by, I'd say it's very important. On the creative side, I came back last month from Cannes Lion this year, and it's really interesting to see how the creative industry are really responding to experience as well, and really kind of recognising the value that experience has and also the role creative has in that. So it's interesting categories been announced. There's a whole category for experience, which is telling in itself. And really recently, which I think is really interesting, is a whole category for creative e-commerce, which, sort of even 3 years ago, we wouldn't have seen at something like Cannes Lion. So I think if that's a sign as to how important it is, then I'd definitely take that as, it's incredibly important.
Yeah, thank you. Amy?
I echo that sentiment entirely. I think working in a prestige company, customer experience is probably the fundamental of everything that we do every day. So even our tech team, that is the first thing that they consider before we build any requirements. It's the first thing before we think about doing any UX is we'll create a bunch of different archetypes depending on the consumer that we think, that we know based on the data that we have that is visiting the site. Customer experience in beauty is quite a different kettle of fish, if you will. I think it's largely down to the fact that it's an extremely personal purchase for men and women. I think for us, and at Charlotte Tilbury and certainly in previous roles, customer experience has to remain at the forefront because of the risks if we don't do it right. I think from anything, whether it's a delivery proposition or your gift wrap or whatever it may be, if it's not perfect and if it's not super, super easy, then it's really bad. The customer doesn't have a kind of, it's okay, I don't mind. Certainly not in the prestige. So for us, it is the number one thing that we do every day.
Yep. Thank you.
I agree with that, and I think what we've noticed here is there's actually not really any such thing as a good customer experience, because that's what we expect nowadays. Everything that's been called out has been about bad customer experiences, and I think that shows where we are. Is I can't even remember the last time I went, wow, that was an amazing experience when it comes to advertising or going on someone's site, but I remember if it was terrible and if I had a bad experience. And I think, unfortunately, that's where we've got to, is we expect so much, our consumers expect so much, that's now where our customer experience sits, is our customer experience is delivering exactly what the client is trying to do when they're trying to do it. And if we don't do that, then unfortunately we will end up with a bad customer experience. And from a media side, you can drive the best traffic in the world. If that person lands on site and it's not a very good site and they have a bad experience, they won't convert. It doesn't matter how qualified that traffic is. So you've got to make sure that everything ties together, which I think a lot of people have touched on today already.
Yeah, I take it even further than that and say that, so I have to put my acquisition hat on, and I'm always thinking about how I can grow a brand with the least amount of money possible, and make it more efficient. And if what you find is that a lot of your traffic starts getting driven by word of mouth or organically from people that high NPS score, that's where you start to make your efficiencies. If you're growing a brand and you're depending entirely on paid media, much as I love it, it gets people in through the door, you're going to be in trouble quite quickly from a financial point of view. So I think it's beyond just getting them on site and converting them. It's actually making sure there's advocates of your brand and that they're going to be loyal to your brand and spread the word for you on your behalf.
Okay, good. So it was a good topic that we're discussing. But if it's so important, and we've had all of these presentations and there's lots of other content that we could refer to, what are the challenges, what are the barriers that you experience? Perhaps, Amy, we can start with you from Charlotte Tilbury perspective.
I think the biggest and the one that always comes to front of mind, and it's constantly in conversations internally, and particularly because Charlotte is at the forefront of our brand, she's incredibly involved, which is brilliant, but also it's difficult when you're trying to get to certain levels of creativity, because her stamp is always going to be the fundamental first stamp. So I think that is a challenging thing. I think the bigger problem is scale, and I know we might kind of discuss this in a little bit more detail as we go along. We are, for those who don't know, the fastest ever growing beauty brand in the UK, and we are pretty much the size that MAC were after kind of 12 years, after 5. So just to kind of give, in terms of gravitas, trying to keep up with that in terms of growing a team. We're now nearly 1,000 people worldwide, and maybe bigger than people anticipate. So I think us knowing how do we all agree on one source of truth. We're currently in the process of kind of trying to work that out in terms of a tech team in particular. What is our data and who should we all be going to, and what is the source, and is it something that needs to be collaborative, or should it be siloed? And I think there is arguments for both. So I think definitely scale, and I think working for a brand where a founder is so close is also challenging, because you just need to make sure that you're always balancing between what a customer wants and maybe what the brand wants. So they're the biggest two things for us, I would say.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And Claire, what challenges do you find in your experience
Biggest
in
challenges?
Delivering, great customer experience?
Really good question. So I suppose Beryl in many ways is, particularly as a direct-to-consumer brand, is really not as far along that journey at all. Thinking back to the days at giffgaff, I remember I actually joined giffgaff, then left, and then came back again, and I kicked off a personalization project, and then 2 years later arrived, and it had inched forward a tiny bit, but it was still very much in progress. And I think it's managing to get that and we've talked about it quite a lot already, but that really, really big challenge of getting all your data together to a point that you can trust it. And I don't think anyone's cracked it yet. Mm-hmm. I spent 2 years trying to do that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's interesting to start it again from the beginning. To, I think, the point that was made before about digital transformation being necessary, it's kind of cool to start from nothing and be able to actually just create everything digitally first.
Yep.
But yeah, certainly at my stage, we're not at the point that we can be as sophisticated as
It's quite an interesting concept, because what you're saying is that some of the legacy of established businesses holds them back, and that gives an advantage to new businesses.
Absolutely,
who don't have that legacy to contend with. Elizabeth, from a creative perspective, we saw some fantastic creative concepts, high impact earlier on, but what are the barriers and the challenges that brands and their partners have in actually getting those onto the devices of the consumers?
I think with any threat or challenge, you can very quickly flip that into an opportunity. And I think the thing, sort of creative or any type of speaking here, is the choice that people have to actually disengage from your experience altogether. We're marketeers, but also customers and people as well. And as people and as customers, we really enjoy that control. We can flip the channel on TV, we can skip that ad, we can unsubscribe from that newsletter. Like, control and choice has never been bigger. So that is a threat, because we can create this amazing experience and no one will even get to see it. The upside to that, the opportunity to that, is whilst we're so much quicker at tuning out of what we don't want, we are so much quicker at sort of binging on what we do want. Just some examples. There's some research to show that chapters in books are getting longer. Movies are getting longer. I'm sure not the only one to confess that I'll happily while away weekend binge watching The Crown on Netflix. If you love it, you want more of it. So a lot of the work that I do with agencies is getting to think about choice and immersion. You should give people the choice. You shouldn't force people to see things or do things that they don't want to do. But if they've made that choice to lean in and engage with you, give them more, and let them immerse, and just roll with it, and you'll reap the rewards off the back of that.
Thank you. Craig, it's really important, but why aren't more advertisers able to achieve more from your experience?
I think it's funny, because I think it's silos, and we've sort of touched on it. We've talked about creative, we've talked about brand, we've talked about data in sort of 3 segments. So we've even done it here. And that's the biggest thing. I apologise to anyone who works in brand here, but I would say that brand is one of our biggest challenges, because brands don't want to adapt. Brands are who they are, and that is important, because that's how you get brand advocates. That's how you bring people back and inspire customer loyalty. But it's also a danger, because if you don't adapt that as your customer adapts and change what you want with that, that can lead down huge issues. That being segmented to one point, they sort of talk to creative, but don't always talk to creative. They might get final sign-off, but then creative going away, they'll produce the assets that they want. They're probably pulled in multiple directions, especially if people run omnichannel and they've got stores and offline and catalogues that need to go out. And if digital, which we find with a few clients, digital is quite far down the list, which, considering how much investment now goes into digital, is quite a strange thing to imagine. And then you sort of end up where you know what you want to do, you know who you want to target, you know who they are, but then you've got a brand and a creative that don't talk to that audience that you're then trying to target, and you know who's going to convert. And I would say that's the biggest challenge, and I think from the sort of incubator collective, that's now what we're trying to tie up with, that technology element and data element from DQ&A to the media buying from NMPi, and then that creative element from Joystick. And I think hopefully that's going to evolve and really help us move our clients forward by tying all of those elements together and helping brands understand how to tie those elements together as well.
Thank you. Amy, you touched upon one of the challenges in Charlotte Tilbury, and I'm sure in many other businesses, being getting alignment across the business and understanding what metrics you should be using. Can we just talk a little bit, and you're able to talk a little bit about how, when you put techniques and tactics in place, you measure those effectively? What's your viewpoint on actually measuring the impact of these approaches?
I mean, customer experience and loyalty. I mean, yeah, lifetime value, we talk about it a lot. I feel it's a bit arbitrary often when we measure it. I think we talk a lot internally, but also, and I've seen in a lot of conferences as of late, customer loyalty is an incredibly difficult thing to measure. Yeah. Incredibly difficult, because it's a mixture of things, especially if we're a content-led brand like we are. We're actually okay with customers actually just absorbing our content forever and never purchase a thing, because they're the people that tell their friends, and they're the people that will then come back and purchase. So we're comfortable with that side of things. How are they therefore not loyal? Are they therefore not in that bucket? Did they sit somewhere else? We don't know. We're trying to work all that out. I think measurements in terms of KPIs, yeah, lifetime value, yes. How often do the return? Is it every 6 months? Is it every 12 months? What's the average order value? And does that change? Is new versus returning better? Yeah, we know that returning customers spend more money. Why is that? Okay, because they trust us. Well, how do we get that exact same way of thinking to new customers? New customers buy different things. Naturally, they come in and buy things that they're going to, for example, for us, it's a lipstick, it's the most accessible, it's one of our cheapest SKUs. But we're trying to work out, okay, what will they then come back and buy? Is it that easy to convert a customer from a lipstick to a £70 face cream? No, is actually the answer. And we're trying to work out how we create loyalty into the categories rather than just loyalty into the brand.
Right.
And that is incredibly hard to measure. We use GA360 and we've got lots of other kind of fabulous tools that we use internally, and we've got an amazing tech team, huge bunch of developers that are currently building out this fabulous data warehouse. But I think for us, and I think for most companies that I speak to every day, it's definitely brand side, nobody's quite cracked it yet. Right. And I think measuring it is kind of it's definitely arbitrary, and I think we need to almost across the board of B2C and B2B, what is the general measurement, and align on that, because I think everyone thinks different things.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Elizabeth, would you add anything to that from a creative perspective?
I think creatively we can do a lot more before we actually get to that point. It's more about what you do before, always trying to work out what is the potential of something rather than the impact. And I do quite a lot around experimentation, something that we encourage a lot. And I think data and technology allows us to do that with that very sort of small risk that used to be the issue before. We can't go and test and learn because we're committing too much money, it's going to take too long. That's not the case anymore. Even if you chuck a video out on YouTube, you can put it out now and you get pretty much real-time results to see how it's going to perform. So I think, to get around that, just put it out there. Google don't profess to have all the answers either. Customer behaviour is changing, media landscape's changing all the time. There's no way all of us can keep up with that. So, don't just experiment willy-nilly. Have a hypothesis, what do you think is going to happen, and create versions and put them out there and let your audience do the talking and go from there.
Yeah. Would anyone else like to add to this question?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. That was one of the first steps I took. Beryl had a really engaged customer base, but it was relatively small with its B2C proposition. And the interesting thing about cyclists is there's so many different kinds. And so what we did was we started testing content through the email channel. We have phenomenal click-through rates. And so, my question was, could we get them even higher? Because these are people being served identical content. What if we start segmenting and start using a really powerful, and by powerful I mean upgrade from MailChimp. I mean, if you're a small brand, really, really powerful and well integrated to your e-commerce system, email client, and start testing. And we've learned so much in the past 6 months from doing that. If there's any smaller brands out there, I'd highly recommend that's your first step.
Thank you. Craig, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, nothing else.
Okay, good. Back to the creative. What's and the questions are coming in on Slido, so if you do have any questions, please, I'm seeing them here, so please put them forward. What's the most impressive digital creative any of you have seen, and why? So feel free to pick that one.
Well, having come sort of fairly fresh from Cannes Lions, although you never feel particularly fresh at the Cannes Lions, there was some really cool work there. And I mentioned this new category of creative e-commerce, which is what sort of comes to mind now. I think they actually won the Grand Prix. And what they did that was really cool, because I think really good experiences really kind of understand the balance between how much effort they expect on the customer versus the reward they actually get. We're kind of very, don't really understand just how little people really give a shit about our brands and our experiences. So let's kind of state that as sort of base level number one. But this brand, it was Xbox. I don't know if you saw it. They had this really cool campaign. It was called Franchise. And what it was is Xbox customers could basically design their own console. So they could pick the colours and how it looked, make it really cool. So that's pretty cool in the first place if you're an Xbox fan. But the brand went one step further, and they actually sold those consoles on their site so other customers could actually buy them. And then the person that designed it actually got a bit of a kickback. It made a bit of cash on the side off the back of their design. And I think it's almost like the effort involved was almost as good as the reward. And I think that was just, in terms of getting that balance right, that just struck me as just absolutely nailing it. Mm-hmm.
The best thing I've ever seen, and I haven't seen anyone do anything like it, and maybe it's because I was a recipient of it, Nike, and I don't know if there is anyone from Nike here, but kudos to you. They did a campaign, I think it was way back in 2012 now, and it was half a creative campaign, and it was quite UGC focused, but they kind of put it everywhere. It was outside the store in Oxford Street, and they basically created 100,000 bespoke animations for all of their different customers across the world that use the Nike training app. So they basically used all of the data. I was one of them, so fortunate. And they got this animation kind of just sent to them. And you got to set it in the app and you opened it and there we go. And it was me, a mini version of me running around. And it was like, oh, remember that time that you ran and did this and you did the 3 pigs challenge. And it literally tracked my year in a mini animation. And I lost my mind and I just was like, everybody's have to see this. I just couldn't, it really was the first of its kind, and it's still, that was like, 5 years ago. Yeah. I could be off, but I still think I've not seen anything that it just went so viral. I would recommend any of you to go and watch it on YouTube afterwards to just see some examples of what they were. And it was all just based on data and some technology, but the impact that it had on both a customer and then the actual virality of then actually sharing it was enormous. Yeah. And then they obviously had this humongous UGC campaign. So it all came out. But yeah, I think that was the best thing I've ever seen.
Interesting. 2 great examples. Great.
I would say it's always if you can make it speak to the person. So there's some like really low tech examples of that when you're asking your customer base to send you a picture of them with something that you're doing, and you're sort of gathering it all together and essentially giving them a platform. But there's a really great example I came across the other day. It was a company called Playmob, and they created a mini game that gets served to people as an ad space in a game. So you're playing Candy Crush and you come to the ad space. And the game they created was on the behalf of, I think, the World Oceans Day, and you became a endangered porpoise, and you had to swim through the oceans and collect plastic. And by the end of it, they were able to measure how much plastic, I think it was like 2.5 million pieces of plastic had been picked up from the ocean in this game. But what was really fantastic about it was that it fully engaged people. Actually, 45% of people, I think, played it again, which shows just how engaging the game was. And they also measured the impact in terms of what people said that they would do after it. Would they stop using plastic straws? Would they take a reusable bag to the supermarket instead of a plastic one? And it just, for me, was a great example of how truly immersive advertising can be incredibly impactful.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
I'm going to go back even further than 5 years ago, and this is quite sad because I don't know why I remember this.
You have a good memory.
So I'm a huge advocate of storytelling within creative. I think that's where people need to get to, moving that forwards. And I think the reason is because of the washing powder Daz. Now, this is strange.
Didn't expect this one.
No, I don't even know if Daz still exists, but they ran TV ads probably 15 years ago now, and it was pretty much a little series of soaps, ironically, and each advert evolved the next stage. And it was like watching EastEnders, but within TV ads, within sort of 15 to 30 second slots. And this guy was having an affair, and the woman walked in, and the other woman was hid in the cupboard, and I never found out what happened next. And it's devastated me for 15 years, and I'm actually traumatized from this. And that was TV ads, and I know we're here to speak about digital and things like that, but I still think that shows the power of storytelling. I must have been 12 maybe. I've got no interest in washing powder whatsoever, but it shows the power that good advertising, and especially storytelling through advertising, can make things stick in your brain.
That mystery and curiosity, right?
As well, yeah. I think that's still the best advertising campaign I've ever seen.
Wow, okay, bring back Daz.
Yeah.
There's a couple of quick questions here, very practical one. Claire, which email platform were you referring to earlier?
Oh, Klaviyo.
Klaviyo.
You integrate with Shopify if you're on that platform.
Klaviyo, I hope that helps. And I'm going to amalgamate a couple here. So we have been focusing about customer experience in a digital context, but of course the real world is that we go into stores, we see brands in the outside world. How, perhaps Amy, starting with you, how do we ensure that customers have a seamless, coherent experience online and offline?
Here we go again. So I feel like I'm just like, it's incredibly hard. Everything is hard, right? But I think omnichannel is another word that's being battered about and doesn't really have a meaning. It's like you want to do it all from different channels and it all has one thing, fine. Yeah. I think single customer view, people assume everyone has it, and it's actually scary the amount of businesses and big businesses that do not. So I think that is definitely the first and most important thing before I would even consider trying to create some robust omnichannel strategy. Is like, do you have a single customer view, and if no, get one. And of course that takes time, because then you need to build up the data. I think, although we seem massive, maybe to some of the women in the room who know Charlotte Tilbury well, we've only got kind of a couple of freestanding stores, and then in some counters around the world, and a freestanding store obviously in Dubai that's just opened. But for the large majority of the time, we see quite a small crossover between store and online. we've also got this 18 to 80 tagline, so we're kind of saying that whoever you are, and man or woman and whatever age and race, come and shop with us. We try where we can to do as much data capture within store to try and draw that picture together. But in terms of the experience, having a makeup artist on hand to actually apply product to you, and as I was saying earlier, to kind of touch on that very lightly again, it's so incredibly personal. And if you're a woman that doesn't actually wear a lot of makeup and you want to learn what that's like for the first time, you're definitely not going to go online and spend £175, unless you're wealthy and lovely for you. But that's unlikely. And I think for us, it's how do we get those people that actually maybe don't know everything about makeup, and actually the ones that I was speaking about earlier at the minute are just customers of content. That's all they are to us. How do we get them to go into store and experience it and then come back and maybe replenish online? We do try and create that kind of triangular experience. Measuring it, again, I would be lying if I said we've nailed it, because we haven't, but we're definitely getting there, and we've got some really exciting insights that we continue to develop to help us inform our on-site experience and our store experience as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Craig, how are you seeing advertisers, brands, businesses setting themselves up to be able to ensure there is that coherent online-offline customer experience?
Not very well,
Okay.
is probably the answer in the first place. And for us, the first thing is always trying to measure what's happening in the movement of people between online and store. If you can start trying to measure that and understand how people move between the two, it might be easier to tie them together. If you know that it's your higher end products that are driving people in store, you then know what you should be pushing in store. And that's probably the first bit of that understanding that I think we can help with, and media can really help with. And attribution, yes, it's not perfect. Google have got solutions, Facebook have got solutions, e-receipts are good, but there is no true solution. But if you can at least start trying to understand the people who are moving from online to offline, trying to measure offline to online is obviously almost even more difficult. Then at least you've got a base to understand how you should start trying to combine them. And the second thing is break down your silos. We touched on brand, creative, and media. There's then normally a whole other department, which is your offline marketing
And what
department.
about people? Chief customer officer, for example, that sits across. And maybe Amy, you're nodding here. What's your views?
We don't have a chief customer officer. We have kind of GMs that look after particular region, so one from EMEA, one from North America, one for UK, and so on. And as we grow, we'll obviously scale that out. We have a really amazing brand marketing department, so they kind of, before product launch, before a PA that Charlotte might do, before NPD, so actually development. Not many beauty businesses.
NPDs for people in the room who don't?
Sorry, NPD, so new product development, so new, fancy, pretty things. But for those that may or may not work in beauty in the audience, to actually be involved in product development from an e-commerce perspective is like slim to none in the industry. It's the opposite at Charlotte Tilbury. So when we're actually now sitting with the product development director every day to go through what are the products that we want to see based on the data that we see on site, which is amazing, and amazing experience for me and my team as well. There's always that kind of one overview that's an overarching theme that I think people constantly try to talk about within the business, which is how do we make sure that the experience is easy? How do we make sure it's artful? And that we always combine art with commerce.
Right.
And that is an overarching theme, and that's what we just kind of have to instill in us every day, rather than one officer that kind of controls it.
Yeah.
It's more of an ethos.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Claire, would you add anything?
I mean, you covered a lot of it. I think.
Sorry.
No. To your point on, I guess the silos of offline and online. I mean, as a small brand, I'm playing the long game. I see the offline channels as a way to scale via distribution, and I will take everything I can in terms of insights from the customers I have a direct relationship with in order to then make assumptions and that I can, because unfortunately, big box stores don't spend a lot of time giving smaller companies their insights. But I will say that it again comes back to that really, really important direct channel and direct route to that customer, and it's why we invest in content like you guys do, because it means that you've got this constant communication and conversation with your customer, and you're able to feed that into your new product development as well, which is and then when you get to see those products launch and you see the reaction and people being genuinely taken aback that you've taken on their suggestions and that you've incorporated their feedback. It's really, really phenomenal as a brand.
Yeah, thank you. Elizabeth, staying on the online, offline, or the coming together of two worlds, how are you seeing technology, the digitization of billboards, for example, help to ease that or maybe make it more difficult? I don't know. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I think technology just obviously helps put. So you think like creatively, I think we think about all the different like objects you're creating. You can think of like creative objects if you like. So you've got your out of home poster, you've got your TV ad and whatever. And I think where technology can help is kind of change that view of creating these objects and these disparate things and create more of like a system. So you think it's basically your overall creative idea and kind of think of it as a system that can flex to allow for those different media placements. So for your out of home, for your TV and radio and whatnot. And deliberately create your creative idea to flex to that. So think about the elements within, say, video script. You've got your voiceover, you've got your sound, you've got your picture. How can those elements like flip and change according to sort of where they're being delivered, but also who they're talking to? So that's another thing we talk about quite a lot with agencies. Is kind of moving from those objects to systems. And I think if you sort of think bigger picture like that, it's kind of more akin to actually how technology is serving your creative. And I think it just helps a mindset of creative teams thinking a bit like that, as opposed to the kind of standard 30-second script, which I think many creators are familiar with. So I think that flip will help.
Interesting. So kind of understanding the formats that your creative will be going into and then building them accordingly well ahead of time as opposed to retrospectively.
Yeah,
so we're pretty much out of time. So just a quick fun one right the way along the panel. If 5 years ago it was quite a novel experience to have a taxi be ordered from a mobile phone and pick you up outside, and that was our expectation then, which was that was something that seemed to be novel and a super experience. And today, if it doesn't arrive in 2 minutes, we get frustrated with that. Our expectations are getting higher all the time. What are our expectations going to be for customer experience in 10 years from now?
Gosh, good question.
Who would like to go first?
I'm like, was that on the list?
It's come on in the Slido list.
I don't mind going first because I feel like I have an automatic thing in my mouth or head, whatever. Good God, you know what I mean. I would say it's all about now, isn't it? I think we used to laugh like a couple of years ago when that whole thing came out, like Amazon drones, and we were like, they're so weird, like. Yeah. And then now, come on, it's like embarrassing that we thought that. But I think that the demand of now is going to become a thing across everything. So it's not just going to be taxis. It's like if someone wants a lipstick and they want it within 60 minutes, that is absolutely what we will be doing in probably less than 10 years' time. Right. I think the expectation is now, and it's perfect and it's faultless. It should be like the returns process of Amazon is probably one of the main reasons people shop there. Yeah. It's the ease, especially in beauty products. If I don't like it, if I have a reaction, if whatever, we have an amazing returns policy at Charlotte Tilbury, but we don't really shout about it. So I think it's being in a position where we go, you know what, like it's a free for all that's controlled. Yeah. Is probably where I would say.
Very good. Yeah. That's a good strong start.
I think someone mentioned voice earlier, so I think that's going to be incredibly intuitive. We're just going to have chats with our brands and companies just like they're our best mates. So I think that's just going to be incredibly natural. And also surfaces. I think everything's just going to be kind of playable and things you can do. There's some amazing stuff doing it at Google with a project called Project Jacquard. I don't know if you've seen it. Did a collaboration with Levi's where actually they've got the sort of like sleeve of your Levi's jacket and you can sort of stroke the sleeve and it's connected to like your iPod or something. You can turn your music down or you can make a call. Or so I think kind of being able to interact with your surfaces and then that interaction be very natural through your own voice and through your own conversation. I think that'd be very everyday in 10 years.
Yeah, interesting.
I think it's going to be around the customization and personalization of products and manufacturing. So we already touched on it briefly with the Xbox example. I think that's going to become commonplace, and gone will be the days of really high MOQs for products. It will be a lot more on demand, whether that's led by 3D printing or other types of manufacturing technology advances.
Yeah, thank you. And finally, Craig.
I'll go even further. Roald Dahl in whenever he wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, he already invented the TV.
It's a real history lesson we're having
today. He already invented the TV that you could reach in and pick the chocolate bar out of the TV. One day that's probably where we're going to get to. It is the now. It might not be 10 years away, but who knows? The speed technology moves at nowadays, it may not be that unrealistic that in our lifetime we may see that. I hope we do, because it'd be amazing.
My biggest expectation actually is in the travel space, and thanks to Elon Musk, who's leading us to expect that we can fly from New York to Sydney in 30 minutes in 10 years from now, and that'll be a real game changer as well, I think, and really open up the world.
They all have speed in common.
Yeah, exactly. Here, now, and speed. So, well, thank you very much, panelists, for joining us today. That was really fascinating. Thank you.